But it is extraordinary to have them carefully mummified, wrapped up, cocooned, put in these coffins and placed in their father's tomb.
Something strange is happening in Egypt right now. Deep beneath the Valley of the Kings, a team of experts has discovered something unusual hidden inside the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, something that could potentially rewrite the entire history of ancient Egypt. Yet instead of opening it, the excavation has suddenly stopped. Some believe it is far too dangerous to continue, while others whisper about ancient curses, secret chambers, or truths the world is not ready to face. What could be so terrifying? Join us! A hidden chamber beneath the pharaoh's tomb. When radar first scanned the painted walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber, scientists saw something they'd never expected. Strange, faint lines beneath the plaster, as if the walls themselves were hiding a secret. Some thought it was an illusion caused by age and humidity, but others saw the outline of sealed doorways. Behind them, they believed, might lie another chamber, untouched for over 3,000 years. If that's true, it could change everything we know about ancient Egypt. But here's the shocker. The experts who could open it refused to do so. What could possibly be so dangerous about opening a tomb? What do they know that the rest of us don't? And what's the real reason they're too afraid to take that step? It began with Dr. Nicholas Reeves, a respected British Egyptologist who examined high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's burial chamber in 2015. While studying the surface of the north and west walls, he noticed subtle variations, barely visible edges and shifts in plaster texture that hinted at something extraordinary. To his trained eye, these looked like the outlines of sealed doorways, possibly leading to hidden rooms that had been walled off before Tutankhamun was buried. His proposed theory was incredible. The young pharaoh's tomb might have been only a small extension of a much larger, earlier burial, which, according to Reeves, may likely be of Queen Nefertiti, Tutankhamun's stepmother, one of the most famous figures in ancient history, whose resting place has never been found. Within days, the idea exploded across headlines. Media outlets around the world ran with the claim, a lost chamber behind King Tut's wall, with perhaps even Nefertiti herself waiting beyond it. For a brief moment, it seemed like the world was on the brink of the most sensational archaeological discovery of the century. But then, gaps appeared in the story. The first radar scans appeared to confirm Reeves's hypothesis, detecting subtle anomalies behind the north wall. But when follow-up tests were performed by different teams using more advanced equipment, the results didn't match. Some readings showed possible voids, others showed none at all. The deeper the experts looked, the less certain things became. So what went wrong? Well, ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, isn't magic. It's physics. It works by sending electromagnetic waves into a surface and recording the reflections that bounce back. In solid rock or soil, it's a powerful tool, but inside an ancient limestone tomb covered in thick plaster and painted decoration, the signals can easily distort. The radar can't literally see, but it works by measuring differences in material density. Even a patch of moisture, a hidden crack, or a thick layer of paint can create echoes that mimic the signature of an empty chamber, creating, in other words, a false positive. Different radar systems also penetrate to different depths and frequencies, so when one team uses a high-frequency instrument and another uses a lower one, they might not be measuring the same layer of material at all. On top of that, temperature, humidity, and the composition of the wall itself can all influence the readings. It's like trying to take an X-ray through a stained glass window. Every color, every bubble in the glass affects what you see. So while the early scans seemed thrilling, later reviews by the Japanese and Italian teams concluded that what looked like voids might just be natural variations in the stone or inconsistencies in the plaster. Still, even with all that uncertainty, some archaeologists pushed for direct investigation. a small hole drilled through the decorated plaster to insert a fiber optic camera. It would be quick, minimally invasive, and could settle the question forever. Yet Egypt's leading conservators and ministry officials flatly refused, claiming there was no way they would grant permission for that. And their reasoning was far more chilling than superstition or bureaucracy. Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the most fragile archaeological environments on Earth. For over 3,000 years, it has existed in a near-perfect equilibrium, sealed, silent and stable. The pigments on its walls, made from minerals like ochre, malachite and azurite, cling to the plaster through the thinnest chemical bonds. Even a small change in humidity can cause them to lift, flake or crystallize. The plaster itself rests on limestone that breathes with the temperature, expanding and contracting microscopically over time. Any disturbance to that balance, vibrations, air movement or pressure changes, can start a chain reaction of decay. Imagine, for instance, that a team drills a hole the width of a pencil through the north wall to feed a camera cable. It seems harmless, but that tiny puncture changes the air pressure inside the chamber. Oxygen and modern microbes rush in. Within hours, invisible condensation forms inside the layers of paint. Within days, salt crystals start to bloom beneath the pigment. Within months, the delicate surface begins to blister. A year later, sections of the original paint, the same paint brushed on by artisans of the 18th dynasty, begin to fall away in tiny flakes. Within a decade, the damage is irreversible. Experts have seen this happen before. In other Egyptian tombs, where micro-drilling or invasive sampling was attempted, sections of decoration deteriorated almost immediately afterward. One conservation scientist famously warned that a single misplaced probe could undo a century of preservation. Because the moment you break a sealed environment that has been stable for thousands of years, you set off a cascade of changes that no human technology can fully reverse. And then there's the threat we can't even see: microbial bloom. The air inside sealed tombs is often nearly sterile, but once exposed to outside air, even a trace of modern bacteria or mold spores can spread rapidly. They feed on the organic binders in ancient paint, literally consuming the artwork from the inside out. It happened in the past. After Tutankhamun's tomb was first opened in 1922, dark fungal spots began appearing on the painted walls within months. Scientists later determined they were the byproduct of exposure to modern humidity and human breath. Now imagine repeating that mistake, only this time inside an even smaller, unventilated hidden chamber. One wrong move, one careless hole, and the only intact royal burial ever found in the Valley of the Kings could start to self-destruct from within. So the why isn't mystery theatre, it's the science of preservation. And to understand how we got here, we must rewind. Inside the life and death of Tutankhamun. In the world of archaeology, it's rare for a century-old discovery to suddenly become controversial again, but that's exactly what's happened with Tutankhamun's tomb. A fresh wave of research using new scanning technologies has reignited debates that many thought were long settled. Experts now believe the burial site of Egypt's most famous pharaoh might not just be incomplete, but it might be hiding something of unimaginable importance behind its painted walls. How could a secret this massive remain undetected for over 100 years? To unravel this mystery, we first have to look back at the young ruler himself, the boy behind the golden mask. Tutankhamun ascended to the throne around 1332 BCE, probably at the age of 9 or 10, during one of the most chaotic periods in Egypt's history. His father, Akhenaten, had shattered centuries of tradition by abolishing the worship of Egypt's many gods and replacing them with a single deity, the sun disk Aten. This radical religious revolution plunged the country into turmoil. Temples were closed, priests were stripped of power, and cities tied to the old gods fell into decline. When Akhenaten died, his young son inherited a kingdom on the brink of collapse. But Tutankhamun, guided by older advisors like Ai and the general Horemheb, reversed his father's policies. He reopened the temples, restored the name of Amun, and moved the royal court back to Thebes. In doing so, he effectively saved Egypt's traditional religion from extinction, a remarkable feat for someone barely in his teens. But Tutankhamun's life was brief and troubled. Modern CT and DNA scans of his mummy have revealed that he was physically frail, suffering from a cleft palate, a club foot, and possibly a severe bone disorder. Genetic studies suggest he was the product of inbreeding, as his parents were likely siblings, which may have contributed to his health problems. Scans also show evidence of a broken leg and traces of malaria parasites in his body. Some researchers believe he died from complications of infection after an accident, while others suspect a sudden illness. Whatever the cause, the pharaoh died unexpectedly, probably around the age of 18 or 19, leaving Egypt's priests and artisans scrambling to prepare a burial on extremely short notice. That urgency is exactly what makes Tutankhamun's tomb, termed as KV62 in the Valley of the Kings, so unusual. When British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered it in 1922, the world was stunned. The chamber was small, cramped, and unlike any royal tomb found before, yet it was crammed with over 5,000 artifacts, golden statues, chariots, thrones, jewelry, and the now iconic golden death mask. For the first time, the world saw what an intact pharaonic burial truly looked like. Overnight, Tutankhamun became a global legend, and Tutmania swept across Europe and America. But the discovery also changed archaeology forever. Until then, many Western expeditions had treated Egypt's treasures as personal prizes, removing artifacts with little regard for preservation or context. In this light, Carter's work marked a shift towards systematic excavation and careful documentation. It was the first major find to be studied scientifically in real time, with photographs, notes, and detailed catalogues. Tutankhamun's tomb helped professionalize the science of archaeology itself. Still, there's something about KV62 that has puzzled experts for decades. Compared to other royal tombs in the valley, it's shockingly small, just 4 main chambers, far less elaborate than the sprawling, multi-corridor burials of later pharaohs. The entrance corridor turns sharply, the decorative scenes seem incomplete, and the wall paintings are unusually simple. Reeves and others have pointed out that parts of the wall decoration appear to have been painted over earlier outlines, as if artisans repurposed an existing tomb that wasn't originally built for Tutankhamun. Some figures on the north wall even appear to have been reworked to resemble Tut himself, suggesting the chamber may once have belonged to another royal. This theory gained traction because of subtle architectural clues. The layout mirrors the orientation of tombs typically used for queens rather than kings. The burial chamber seems to have been adapted hastily, with doorways plastered shut and painted over in a hurry. If true, it means the young pharaoh was buried in a space not meant for him, possibly one that had already been partially used. That's where the idea of a hidden extension, perhaps even a secret chamber beyond the walls, becomes especially compelling. So how do scientists investigate something buried behind layers of rock and paint without touching it? That's where the science of non-invasive imaging comes in. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, has been the primary tool used at KV62. In theory, if there's a hidden cavity behind a wall, the radar will detect a clear change in the signal. However, limestone is a challenging medium as it's naturally uneven, filled with mineral veins and pockets of air that can distort readings, and in this case, it's covered with thick layers of plaster and ancient paint. These factors combined result in frequent false positives, readings that look like open spaces but are really just irregularities inside the rock. To improve accuracy, researchers have also tried infrared thermography, a technique that measures tiny differences in surface temperature. The idea is that if there's an empty chamber behind part of the wall, it will heat up or cool down at a slightly different rate than solid stone. Thermal cameras can detect these variations as patterns of red and blue, potentially revealing hidden voids. But this method, too, has limits. The readings can be affected by the time of day, the temperature outside, or even the angle of the light hitting the wall. A difference of just half a degree can change the entire interpretation. More recently, scientists have explored the use of muon tomography, a cutting-edge imaging method that relies on cosmic rays. Muons are subatomic particles that constantly shower the Earth from space. They can pass through rock, but at different rates depending on how dense the material is. By placing sensitive detectors in or around a structure, researchers can map where muons pass freely, indicating empty spaces, and where they are absorbed, indicating solid material. This technique has already been used to locate hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. However, the challenge is that muon tomography requires extended measurement times, sometimes months or years, and highly specialized equipment. The burial chamber's small size and fragile environment make setting up detectors extremely difficult. Moreover, since the tomb is a protected UNESCO heritage site, every modification requires governmental approval, environmental controls, and full international oversight. So while muon imaging could eventually provide definitive answers, it's not yet practical for Tutankhamun's tomb. What makes this entire process so complicated is that no single imaging method is enough on its own. Each tool has strengths and weaknesses, and in a site as delicate as KV62, overlapping confirmation from multiple technologies is essential before anyone dares to act. Scientists need converging data, radar signatures, thermal anomalies, and particle maps, all telling the same story. Only then could Egypt's authorities even consider authorizing further exploration. What if one mistake destroys everything? The debate over whether to open Tutankhamun's tomb has become one of the most polarizing arguments in modern archaeology, resulting in two groups of thought. First, those who favor opening the sealed walls of Khufsiks-2 argue that the potential rewards are simply too great to ignore. If Nicholas Reeves' hypothesis is correct, and there really is another chamber concealed beyond Tutankhamun's burial chamber, the historical implications would be staggering. It could contain the resting place of Nefertiti, one of the most enigmatic women in the ancient world, the queen whose face became a global icon, yet whose tomb has never been found. Beyond that, there's the possibility of uncovering unknown inscriptions, religious texts, or burial goods that might illuminate the mysterious Amarna period, that turbulent era when Akhenaten and Nefertiti briefly reshaped Egypt's religion, art, and power. For scientists, the argument extends beyond curiosity. The material inside an untouched chamber could rewrite the biological and cultural history of the late 18th dynasty. DNA samples from sealed environments could be uncontaminated by modern handling, offering the most accurate genetic data ever obtained from the royal bloodline. Inscriptions might clarify uncertain relationships between Tutankhamun, Nefertiti, and the line of pharaohs that followed. Even the pigments, tools, and burial goods could yield new insights into how Egypt adapted after Akhenaten's religious revolution. They argue, if there's even a 10% chance Nefertiti is behind that wall, how can we not look? But the preservationists' counter-argument is equally forceful, and, to many, far more serious. They remind us that the integrity of K562 is non-repeatable, as it is the only fully intact royal tomb ever discovered in Egypt. Once it's opened again, even a fraction, that status will be gone forever. The wall paintings that surround Tutankhamun's burial chamber are fragile to the point of disintegration. They've survived for more than 3,000 years only because the environment inside the tomb has remained perfectly sealed. The scans that inspired Reeves' theory, while fascinating, are far from conclusive. Some experts argue that the anomalies could be nothing more than natural variations in the limestone or traces of old construction plaster. To risk breaking a wall based on data that is ambiguous would be, in their eyes, reckless. Then there's the ethical dimension, something even harder to quantify. To many Egyptologists and Egyptians alike, a royal tomb is also a sacred burial space, and the act of sealing a tomb was meant to secure the spirit's peace for eternity. To breach it again, even with the best intentions, risks violating their eternal resting place and breaking spiritual balance. This is where the disagreement becomes emotional. For some, archaeology is about discovery, about expanding human knowledge no matter the cost. For others, it's about humility before time, about knowing when not to touch. Both philosophies have truth behind them, which is why the debate has become so heated. Meanwhile, inside Tutankhamun's tomb, even objects we've known about for a century are revealing new dimensions. Recent research has reinterpreted several artifacts once thought to be simple burial goods as part of an intricate ritual known as the Awakening of Osiris. According to this view, many of the objects in the antechamber, the ceremonial beds, the wrapped figurines, the gilded chests, weren't just decorations, but were used in the actual performance of a resurrection rite meant to transform Tutankhamun into Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This finding shifts the entire framing of the tomb. It shows that even within the spaces we've already explored, there are layers of meaning still being uncovered through careful, non-destructive analysis. High-resolution 3D scans, pigment spectroscopy, and residue studies have revealed microscopic traces of oils and resins consistent with funerary rituals, details missed for decades. These breakthroughs remind scientists that there's still so much to learn without ever touching what lies behind the North Wall. The tomb continues to teach us, but only because we've learned to listen rather than pry. The idea that every new discovery must involve a hammer and chisel has become outdated. Modern archaeology has evolved into something more patient and respectful. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.